So now we're going to look at some of the things to think about if your relative is invited to a face-to-face assessment after you've sent in the form. So the DWP have said that 90 minutes is the absolute maximum time allowed for travel by public transport to a face-to-face assessment, and that's just one way. So it's very important to take that into consideration. If you receive a letter inviting you to a face-to-face assessment, the first thing you should do is look at how long it's going to take you to get there and back. So think about whether your relative can actually do that journey, whether with support or without support. And think about if they can't do it, you might want to request a home visit. Do you need to rearrange the appointment? Are there any hospital appointments on the same day? Are you going to be away? If you do need to rearrange the appointment, you need to call up as soon as you possibly can to rearrange the appointment. Don't ring them the day before the appointment and ask for it to be changed. People can take support to a face-to-face assessment, and I will read a quote in a bit which explains the importance of support in a face-to-face assessment. You can take extra evidence to a face-to-face assessment. Just make sure that you take a copy of a letter rather than the hard copy. You want to make sure you keep copies of everything that you've given. And a copy of the report can be requested from the DWP after the assessment. The assessor can't give you an opinion on your entitlement, nor can they give you a copy of their report that they make of your assessment. So you must go to the DWP after the assessment if you'd like to see a copy. The assessor should give you an overview of the findings that they have taken from the assessment and answer any questions or concerns you have. At this point, you might want to make a note of what they say in case you feel that the decision doesn't reflect what was discussed in the assessment, and you might want to challenge something later. The DWP have said that if it's clear that the claimant requires more than one person to accompany them to the face-to-face assessment, then this needs to be identified as part of the booking process. So the assessor may decide that the claimant would benefit from a home visit rather than a face-to-face assessment. So if your relative needs support from more than one person, make that clear in the application form so they know straight away. Before you go to your face-to-face assessment, it's a good idea to do a bit of preparation. So make a list of what you want to tell them and tick off each item as you say it during the assessment. So you make sure that they're all ticked off before the assessment ends. It might sound like a really straightforward thing to do, but I think a lot of us do it. We go into appointments that we're talking about quite sensitive issues, and we have a long list in our mind of what we want to say. And then as we're walking out, we think, oh no, I've forgotten to say something and it was really important and I needed to say that. So make sure that you take a list and tick everything off as you go along. You'll be asked to describe a typical day in the face-to-face assessment. Now, I think not many people have a typical day, so if that's the case, then just make that clear. You'll be asked about aids, adaptations and support needed to carry out any task. And they'll also ask about whether support is needed at night as well as daytime. Now, PIP is slightly different to DLA because the DLA was very clear asking whether support or impairments affected somebody at day or night. PIP doesn't ask those specific questions, so if you want to highlight that, then make that clear in your application form and in your face-to-face assessment. Think about whether your relative can do an activity once but not again for the rest of the day or the week, depending on how often they need to do it. So remember the important reliability criteria, whether somebody can do something safely to a reasonable standard in a reasonable time period and repeatedly. In the face-to-face assessment, you might be asked some yes or no questions, but I suggest that you give as much detail as possible and try not to just answer with a yes or a no. It's a good idea to take notes of what the assessor says, especially if you think you might need to challenge anything later. The DWP has a great quote which shows their recognition of carers as advocates and companions and experts about their relatives. So what they say is, when considering inconsistencies, assessors should bear in mind that claimants can often underplay the impact of their conditions. Where the claimant has a mental, cognitive or intellectual impairment, the claimant may not be able to give an accurate account of their health condition or impairment through a lack of insight or unrealistic expectation of their own ability. In such cases, it will be essential to get an accurate account from the companion. So if you're supporting your relative to a face-to-face assessment, you might want to take a copy of that quote with you. If you feel the assessor isn't listening to what you're saying about your relative, you can remind them of the instructions that they've been given by the DWP when somebody is supporting someone else to a face-to-face assessment.